I always thought I had the perfect family. For 20 years, I was married to Camila, the woman I believed was my partner for life. We had a beautiful daughter, Amelia, who had just turned 16, and together we carried on my father's legacy through our family business, Stone Auto Group. From the outside, everything looked ideal: a stable marriage, a thriving company, and a home filled with laughter. But what I didn't realize was that a single family dinner would bring all of it crashing down. It started with small things, the kind of details you brush off when you trust someone. Camila came back from her sister's wedding trip acting distant, no longer greeting me the same way she used to. She claimed she was tired or stressed, but I could feel something was different. Then there were the sudden doctor's appointments she didn't want to explain. I didn't question her because I thought a good husband gives space. Looking back, maybe that was my first mistake. Another change was how close she suddenly grew with her sister Brenda and Brenda's husband, Preston. Preston had married into the family only a few years earlier, and I had grown to see him as a brother. He was quiet, hard-working, and the kind of man you thought you could trust. But I noticed how Camila lit up whenever he walked into a room, how she found excuses to sit near him or touch his arm in casual conversations. When I brought it up, she brushed me off and accused me of being paranoid. Maybe she was right, I told myself. Maybe I was just stressed from fighting off big corporate chains trying to buy out our business. Still, the unease grew. It all came to a head when Camila suggested a big family dinner at Romano's, the restaurant we reserved for special celebrations. That night, the whole family gathered: my parents, her parents, Brenda and Preston, even my brother Jake, who rarely showed up anymore. From the moment we sat down, I felt something in the air. Camila looked nervous, fidgeting with her napkin and avoiding eye contact. And when the waiter offered wine, she refused. That may not sound like much, but my wife never turned down wine at a family gathering. In that moment, puzzle pieces began to click together. Her distance, the secrecy, the sudden change in habits, it all pointed to something bigger. My instincts screamed that something was being hidden right in front of me. And as the night unfolded, I realized I was about to uncover the truth in the most unexpected and devastating way. What happened at that dinner didn't just test my marriage. It tore apart everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and trust. And it began with a single, innocent question at the dinner table that set off a chain reaction none of us could stop. Camila's refusal to drink that night at Romano's played over in my head like a broken record. It wasn't just about the wine. It was the way she smiled without meeting my eyes, the way her hand trembled as she set her glass down, the way Preston shifted in his seat like he was carrying a weight no one else could see. Something wasn't right, and for the first time in years, I couldn't convince myself to ignore it. To understand why it hit so hard, you'd have to know the kind of marriage I thought I had. Camila wasn't just my wife. She was the girl I'd met in college, the one who had stood by me when Stone Auto Group was nothing more than a modest lot my father left behind. Together we'd built it into a business worth millions. We'd raised Amelia with values of honesty and hard work, at least that's what I thought. I believed in Camila, believed in us, so much that I'd never even considered the idea of betrayal. But in the weeks leading up to that dinner, things kept happening that I couldn't ignore. Camila was glued to her phone more than usual, stepping out of the room to take calls she said were about family events or errands. When I asked simple questions, she grew defensive, snapping at me with a sharpness that felt foreign. And yet, just when I started to doubt, she'd pull me back in with a soft smile or a casual reassurance that I was imagining things. Then there was Preston. He wasn't flashy, not the kind of man who drew attention. He worked in construction management, steady and dependable. That's why I trusted him. I'd even floated the idea of him joining the dealership business. We'd had long conversations about opening a 5th location together, expanding the brand. I thought he respected what I'd built, maybe even admired it. What I didn't see at the time was how easily admiration can turn into envy, and how envy can twist into something darker. Family gatherings used to be simple. Birthdays, holidays, summer cookouts in the backyard. But recently, those same gatherings had started to feel off. I'd catch Camila watching Preston a little too closely, or laughing at his jokes like they were funnier than they really were. She'd brush her hand against his arm in casual conversation, the kind of thing that might seem innocent if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention. I couldn't help it. When I brought it up, Camila rolled her eyes and told me I was stressed. "You work too much," she said. "You're imagining things." I wanted to believe her. After all, running a family business comes with pressure most people never see. Competitors had been circling us for months, trying to force a buyout. Every day felt like a battle to protect what my father built, and maybe she was right. Maybe the stress was making me paranoid. But deep down, something didn't feel like stress. It felt like instinct. That night at Romano's only sharpened that feeling. The way Camila insisted on sitting across from Preston instead of next to me. The way her eyes lingered on him even as she pretended to be listening to Brenda. And the silence, that strange, heavy silence that fell whenever certain topics brushed too close to something unspoken. I tried to focus on the normal parts of the evening, the food, the small talk, Amelia's excited chatter about her upcoming school trip. But every detail felt charged, like a storm was building just beyond the walls of the restaurant. My parents sat smiling politely, unaware of the tension. Brenda seemed distracted, though I couldn't tell if she noticed what I was noticing. And Jake, my brother, sat with the kind of detached look that said he was only here out of obligation. The truth is, I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to look back on that night and laugh at myself for being suspicious. But the more I watched, the clearer it became that something had shifted in my marriage, something I couldn't explain away. Even Amelia noticed. She leaned over during the meal and whispered, "Dad, why does Mom seem so nervous?" I brushed her off with a smile, telling her not to worry. But inside I knew she was right. My daughter had picked up on what I was trying so hard to ignore. The hardest part was the memory of who Camila used to be. She was once the most affectionate person I knew. She would greet me at the door with a kiss, sit close to me at family dinners, laugh at our inside jokes. But lately it felt like I was living with a stranger. And that stranger seemed to come alive only when Preston was in the room. I thought about all the late nights at the dealership, all the hours I'd put in to secure a future for us. Was I working to protect a legacy? Or was I unknowingly creating the perfect cover for secrets I wasn't meant to see? The answers weren't clear yet, but one thing was. That night at Romano's wasn't just an ordinary dinner. It was the beginning of something I couldn't stop, a chain of revelations that would tear open wounds I didn't even know existed. And as the laughter at the table started to fade into uneasy silence, I realized that the truth, whatever it was already sitting there with us, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment it would finally break free. The dinner at Romano's played out like a performance where everyone knew their lines except me. On the surface, it was a family gathering, the kind we'd had 100 times before. Plates clattered, waiters moved between tables, and the smell of garlic bread hung in the air. But beneath it all was something heavier, something no one dared to name. Every glance, every word felt loaded with meaning. Camila sat across from Preston, her shoulders tense, her napkin twisted in her hands. Brenda, her sister, seemed cheerful but distracted, talking about a cousin's upcoming wedding while stealing quick looks at her husband. My brother Jake hardly spoke at all, sipping his drink and checking his phone as though he wanted to be anywhere but there. My parents smiled politely, unaware that cracks were spreading through the family right under their noses. What stood out most was Amelia. At 16, she was sharp, observant, and not easily fooled. She picked up on the same unease I did, though she didn't understand the reason behind it. She leaned close to me during the appetizers and whispered, "Why does Mom keep looking at Uncle Preston?" Her words hit me like a knife, because they echoed the thought I was trying to bury. I forced a smile and told her not to worry, but deep down I knew she saw what I saw. For years I had prided myself on being a good judge of people. In the auto business, you learn quickly who you can trust and who's just trying to get something out of you. But family was supposed to be different. Family was supposed to be safe. And yet, here I was, watching my wife's eyes wander to another man, watching my daughter catch it too, and realizing that maybe the enemy wasn't outside trying to buy us out. Maybe it was right at our table. Preston shifted uncomfortably whenever I tried to draw him into conversation. He smiled politely, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. When I asked about his latest project, he gave vague answers, avoiding details. Brenda filled in the gaps for him, bragging about his hard work and dedication, though I noticed she sounded more like she was convincing herself than anyone else. I kept my focus on Camila, and the more I watched, the more obvious the changes became. She laughed too quickly at Preston's jokes. She leaned forward just a little too much when he spoke. She avoided my touch when I reached for her hand. And yet, whenever our parents chimed in, she snapped back into the role of devoted wife, nodding and smiling as though nothing was wrong. The tension wasn't just in my marriage. It was seeping into everything else. My business had already been under attack from larger dealerships trying to force a merger. I had fought hard to keep Stone Auto Group independent, to protect what my father built, but the pressure weighed on me every day. Camila knew how much the company meant to me. She knew the late nights, the early mornings, the sacrifices. And still, she seemed to drift further away, like none of it mattered. I started wondering if my long hours had given her the space she needed to hide secrets. Had she grown close to Preston while I was buried in financial reports and dealership contracts? Did Brenda know? Or was she just another victim in a betrayal that stretched deeper than I realized? The thought of Preston being involved in my family and my business made me uneasy. He'd hinted before about joining me, maybe opening another location together. At the time, it seemed harmless. But now, with the way Camila's eyes followed him, I began to wonder if there was more to it. Was it just about the affair I was starting to suspect, or was there something bigger at play? A plan to weave him deeper into my life until I couldn't separate personal from professional? Meanwhile, Amelia grew more restless. She asked small, innocent questions that carried more weight than she knew. Why is Mom always on her phone? Why does Uncle Preston come over when you're at work? I brushed off her concerns, trying to shield her, but the more she asked, the harder it became to hide the truth. Children have a way of seeing through the cracks adults try to plaster over, and my daughter was no different. What made it worse was the growing distance between Camila and me at home. She no longer waited up when I worked late. She no longer sat beside me on the couch or asked about my day. Our conversations grew shorter, filled with excuses and half-truths. When I pressed, she claimed she was tired, stressed, worried about Amelia's college future. But none of it rang true. The more I thought about it, the more the picture came into focus. Camila's secrecy, her sudden closeness with Preston, his interest in the dealership, all of it pointed to something larger than just a fleeting attraction. It felt deliberate, like pieces of a puzzle slowly fitting together. And I was the one being left out of the picture. As dessert was served, I sat there listening to the chatter around the table, my mind racing. I thought about the years I had invested in my marriage, the trust one had given without hesitation, the family I believed was unshakable. And I realized I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't ignore any longer. The truth was circling closer, and I could feel it pressing in on all sides. I didn't know exactly what form it would take, but I knew one thing with certainty. The night wasn't going to end the same way it began. Something was about to break, and once it did, none of us would ever be the same. The night at Romano's stretched on, every tick of the clock pulling me deeper into a storm I couldn't escape. By the time dessert plates were cleared, I could barely taste the food in front of me. My eyes were fixed on Camila, who still hadn't looked me in the eye for more than a second. Her voice was steady enough when she spoke to my parents, but I noticed the cracks, her forced laughter, the way she pressed her fork too tightly, the quick glances she exchanged with Preston when she thought no one was watching. The air between us was heavy, like the room itself knew something was about to snap. Even the chatter around the table felt different, quieter, as if everyone sensed it too but no one dared to name it. My daughter Amelia, always quick to speak up, grew unusually silent. She kept glancing between me and her mother, her young face caught in the confusion of a child who understood more than she should. I tried to steady myself, to think rationally. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe the stress from the dealership was feeding my paranoia. But the longer I sat there, the more the pieces refused to scatter. They kept lining up, pointing toward the same truth I didn't want to admit. Camila wasn't just distant, she was hiding something, and Preston was at the center of it. At one point, I excused myself and went to the restroom just to clear my head. Staring at my reflection in the mirror, I barely recognized the man looking back. My jaw was tight, my eyes bloodshot, my hands gripping the sink as though I was holding on to the last thread of certainty in my life. For years I thought I had built something unshakable, a marriage, a family, a business. But in that mirror, I saw the cracks that had been there all along. When I returned to the table, nothing had changed on the surface. But beneath the polite smiles and careful conversation, something was building. Jake looked restless, shifting in his seat as though he wanted to leave but didn't dare. Brenda's cheerfulness had dimmed, she spoke less, and her eyes darted toward Camila with a flicker of unease. Preston sat rigid, his hand tightening around his glass every time I glanced his way. And Camila, she was the eye of the storm, silent but charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. Then came the moment that tipped everything. My father, unaware of the undercurrents at the table, raised his glass and gave a small toast to family. He spoke about unity, about the strength of blood and legacy, about how proud he was to see everyone gathered together. It should have been a simple, heartwarming gesture, but instead, it landed like a spark in a room already filled with gas. I watched as Camila's lips pressed into a thin line. Preston lowered his gaze to the table. Brenda fumbled with her napkin. Even Amelia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. It was as if my father's words had brushed too close to the truth, and everyone who knew more than they should couldn't hold their composure. I felt my pulse quicken. The silence after the toast was too long, too sharp. I knew I couldn't let the night end like this, with suspicion gnawing at me and no answers in sight. But I also knew that whatever came next would change everything. Once the words were spoken, once the truth was dragged into the open, there would be no going back. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. "Since we're talking about family," I said, my eyes fixed on Camila, "maybe this is a good time for honesty. No more secrets." The table froze. Camila's fork clattered against her plate. Preston shifted uncomfortably. Brenda's eyes widened. Amelia stared at me, her face pale with confusion. My mother gave me a warning look, as though she could sense the explosion coming. But I didn't stop. The weight of weeks, months, maybe years, of suspicion pressed down on me, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. "I think there are things being kept from me. Things that affect not just me, but all of us sitting here tonight." The silence was unbearable. I could hear the faint clinking of dishes from another table, the soft music playing in the background, but at ours, no one breathed. Camila finally raised her eyes to meet mine, and in that look, I saw both fear and defiance. It was the confirmation I had dreaded, though no words had been spoken yet. Brenda glanced at Preston, her face pale, while he shifted back in his chair, his knuckles white around the stem of his glass. Jake leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, sensing that something bigger than all of us was about to erupt. And Amelia, my daughter, clutched the edge of the table as though bracing herself for impact. I had reached the point of no return. The questions burned inside me, ready to spill out, ready to tear through the fragile piece holding us together. And no part of me wanted to turn back, to pretend none of this was happening. Another part knew it was too late. The truth was already here, crouching between us, waiting to be spoken aloud. The silence after my words hung like a weight none of us could escape. Camila's eyes were locked on mine, and I could see her chest rising and falling faster than usual. I thought she might finally speak, that she would confirm my worst fears or deny them with the fire of someone innocent. But before she could open her mouth, Brenda slammed her glass down a little too hard, her voice trembling as she said, "Maybe tonight isn't the time for this." The outburst drew every eye to her. Brenda had always been the softer one, the peacekeeper of the family. Seeing her this shaken sent a chill through me. She avoided my gaze and looked straight at Camila, as if pleading silently. That was when I realized she knew more than she had ever let on. "Why not tonight?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "If there's nothing to hide, then there's nothing to fear." "Right." Camila flinched at the words, and Preston shifted in his seat again, his jaw tight. It was then that Amelia, my daughter, broke her silence. Her voice was soft but steady, almost too steady for her age. "Mom, please. Just tell the truth." Hearing those words from her cut deeper than any suspicion I'd carried. Amelia had sensed everything, and now she was begging for clarity. Camila's lips parted, but before she could respond, Brenda suddenly stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "He was supposed to tell you." The room seemed to tilt. I turned to Preston, who sat frozen, his face pale. "Tell me what?" I demanded, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sounds of laughter and chatter from other tables seemed distant, like they belonged to another world. Finally, Preston muttered, "It's not what you think." But that only set fire to my fury. "Then tell me exactly what it is. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the two of you." Brenda cut me off, her voice breaking. "It's not just about them." Her words tumbled out like stones rolling downhill. "There's more. Things you don't know about the business. About the money." The shift was so sudden it left me stunned. The business? I had been bracing myself for betrayal in my marriage, not in the very legacy I'd spent my life protecting. "What do you mean, the money?" I asked, my voice cold. Brenda looked at Camila again, almost accusingly. "You should have told him before it got this far." Camila's face went pale. "Brenda, stop," she whispered, her voice shaking. But Brenda didn't stop. She looked straight at me, her hands trembling. "There are accounts, Chase. Accounts you don't know about. Money being moved without your knowledge. And it's not just Camila. Preston's involved too." The ground beneath me seemed to give way. Betrayal in my marriage was one thing, but betrayal in my business, the company my father built, the company I'd sacrificed years of my life to protect, was something I could barely process. My throat tightened, rage and disbelief colliding inside me. "Is this true?" I asked, my voice low, dangerous. Camila stared at me, tears welling in her eyes. She didn't answer. Preston finally spoke, his tone defensive. "It's not what she's making it sound like. We weren't stealing from you. We were setting things aside. For protection. For when the dealership can't keep up anymore." His words hit like another blow. Protection? For when the dealership couldn't keep up. I had fought tooth and nail to keep Stone Auto Group thriving, turning down every corporate giant who tried to buy us out. And all the while, people I trusted, my own wife, my own brother-in-law, were undermining me, planning for my failure. Brenda's tears spilled over as she whispered, "I told them it was wrong. I told them they had to come clean. But they didn't listen." I looked at Camila again, hoping for denial, for any sign that this was some terrible misunderstanding. But all I saw was guilt written across her face. Around us, the restaurant carried on as if nothing had happened, but at our table, the world had shifted. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore, it was financial, professional, and rooted in the very foundation of who I was. My parents sat in stunned silence, my father gripping the edge of the table as though holding himself together. Jake leaned back, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, though I could see the spark of anger in his eyes. And Amelia, my daughter, looked at her mother with a hurt that words could never erase. I felt trapped between exploding in rage and collapsing under the weight of it all. The woman I had trusted with my heart had betrayed me. The man I welcomed into my family had plotted against me. And the business I had poured my soul into was being dismantled from the inside. But even as the truth began to unravel, I sensed there was more secrets, more lies waiting just beneath the surface. The silence around the table told me no one had spoken the full truth yet. The night was far from over, and the worst was still to come. The silence after Brenda's confession was unbearable. Every face around the table seemed frozen, waiting for me to react. I felt like the walls of Romano's were closing in, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. My wife had betrayed me, not only with her heart but with my father's legacy. Preston, the man I had welcomed as family, had been plotting behind my back. And the accounts Brenda mentioned, money being moved without my knowledge, cut deeper than anything else. Finally, I stood up. My chair scraped the floor, and the sound seemed to echo through the restaurant. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. "My trust, my loyalty, my family, my business. And this is how you repay me?" Camilla's eyes filled with tears. "Chase, please. You don't understand." "No," I interrupted. "I understand perfectly. You and Preston wanted to protect yourselves, not the family. You wanted a future without me in it." Preston tried to defend himself, leaning forward with his hands spread as if to calm me. "It wasn't about cutting you out. It was about survival. Big corporations are circling, and you're too proud to admit the dealership can't hold out forever. We were planning for Amelia, for the family's future." But his words only fueled my rage. "Don't you dare use my daughter's name to justify betrayal." I looked at Amelia, who sat silently, her face pale and eyes wide with shock. In that moment, I realized the damage wasn't just to me, it was to her. She had seen her family crumble right in front of her. My father, who had remained quiet until then, spoke with a voice heavy with disappointment. "I built Stone Auto Group with my own hands. And I trusted you, Chase, to carry it forward. If people in this family chose deception over honesty, then it's better we face it now than let it destroy us later." His words grounded me. Anger was still burning inside me, but I felt clarity begin to take its place. I wasn't going to let Camilla or Preston take away what generations of my family had built. I wasn't going to let Amelia grow up thinking lies and betrayal were acceptable. That night ended with no resolution at the table. We left Romano's in silence, each of us carrying our own version of the truth. Camilla tried to speak as we drove home, but I told her there would be time later. I needed space, and more importantly, I needed proof. I wasn't about to make accusations without finding out exactly what had been done. In the days that followed, I threw myself into uncovering the truth. I went through every account, every ledger, every transfer connected to Stone Auto Group. And Brenda had been right. There were hidden accounts, opened under layers of paperwork designed to keep me from noticing. The money wasn't gone, not yet, but it had been siphoned away as if preparing for a future where I wouldn't be in control. The evidence was undeniable. When I confronted Camilla again, she broke down. She admitted to the accounts, admitted to planning with Preston, and admitted that somewhere along the way, their relationship had gone beyond business. She begged for forgiveness, saying it was fear, not malice, that drove her. But by then, the damage was too deep. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild with words. The separation was painful but necessary. I filed for divorce, determined to protect Amelia from the chaos as best I could. Camilla left the house, and Preston left Brenda in the fallout of it all. Brenda, to her credit, apologized to me for not speaking up sooner. She said she had felt trapped between loyalty to her sister and the knowledge of what was happening. I didn't hold it against her. In the end, she was the one who gave me the truth. As for Stone Auto Group, I made changes. I tightened the accounts, brought Jake back into the business despite our differences, and made sure Amelia's future was secure. It took months of long nights and rebuilding trust with my employees, but slowly, stability returned. The dealership survived, not because of hidden accounts or backup plans, but because I refused to give up on what my father started. Amelia struggled at first, caught between love for her mother and disappointment in her choices. But over time, she grew stronger. She saw firsthand what betrayal could do, and she told me one night, "Dad, I'll never forget the way you stood up for us. You didn't let them destroy what you built." That meant more to me than anything else. Looking back, the night at Romano's was the breaking point. It shattered the illusion of a perfect family, but it also gave me the clarity I needed. I lost a marriage, but I held on to my daughter, my business, and my integrity. Betrayal had tried to rewrite my story, but in the end, it didn't win. The lesson I carry now is simple: trust is the most valuable currency we have. Once it's broken, money can't fix it, and excuses can't erase it. What matters is protecting the people and the values that define you, no matter how hard the storm hits. And for me, that meant starting over, but starting stronger.